And now, our first group is the Fearsome Foursome, and they will be presenting today on volunteerism in parks and recreation. Let's welcome Jeff Claffy, Britney Murray, Lauren Pauthoumthong, and Adam Zuckerman.
Can everyone see our screen okay?
Yes.
Looks great.
All right, thank you, Todd. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning and taking time out of their schedule. Like Todd said, we are the Fearsome Foursome, and we will be presenting on volunteerism in recreation and parks. My name is Adam Zuckerman, and I'm a recreation supervisor with the City of Gaithersburg Department of Parks, Recreation, and Culture.
My name is Britney Murray, and I'm a permit and information technician with Montgomery Parks.
I'm Jeff Claffy. I'm a Natural Resources Program Manager for the Howard County Department of Recreation and Parks.
And I'm Lauren Pauthoumthong, and I'm a Recreation Specialist 3 with Harford County Parks and Recreation. So before we dive into our presentation today, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what we'll be discussing in reference to volunteerism in parks and recreation. One is how important volunteers are, how essential they are, what they contribute to our parks and rec programs and projects. How do you, the program administration, the logistics, how do we get our volunteers, our volunteer recruitment, trends and changes over time, and then how do we build a strong community? So we have to kick it off with the importance of our volunteers and our volunteer programs. If you've been with Parks and Recreation long enough, you know how much we need our volunteers. And I wanted to highlight an area in my park at the Anita C. Light Estuary Center that is very near and dear to my heart and wouldn't exist without volunteers, and that is our nature discovery area. This is a place in the park that kids and families can come and get creative in the woods. It's an area with natural materials that they can play and spend time. And especially after the year of 2020, this was something that was really important to our community and the families that came to visit. And this would not exist without the volunteers who helped build it and the volunteers who helped maintain it. Something that has a lot of natural materials, they break down. So we really need people out there to help us keep up with it. And the families that have visited, especially now that we're starting to see people a little more, they've been very grateful and thankful to have this experience, to be able to go out there and be in the woods and feel safe. And I wanted to use this as an example to show that connecting communities is something that's really important with volunteers, whether it's them building it or the communities that come to visit. They're able to enhance our programs and projects and enrich them. If we didn't have the volunteers that came out to help with this, it wouldn't exist. So we need the hands out there. And then enriching, they bring their own experiences, their own skills. As you can see here on the right, there's a snail made out of logs. That takes some skill to make, and volunteers there to be able to do it. So we're grateful for that. And then also providing hands-on experience. So a lot of people who are starting out in their careers, they want to be able to get that experience. And with this project in particular, there were a lot of people that were young and getting this to add to their resume. So there are lots of important things that these volunteer programs can do. And I hope that this highlight will show you a little bit of that. And speaking of that, the nature discovery area was a contribution, and I wanted to mention a few other contributions. I couldn't fit them all in this slide here, but I just want to go over a little bit. So assisting with research and monitoring, the site I work at, we do a lot of different research and monitoring programs, like looking for bluebirds or checking on the grasses out in the water and tracking them. And we need volunteers to be able to do that for us and add to the data. Making our parks more beautiful, whether it's adding bee boxes or planting trees and bushes or cleaning up the trash in our parks. We need lots of people to be able to make that happen. Guiding our youth in sports, the coaches that bring their passion for the sports and teamwork to teach young people how important that is, we wouldn't be able to have that without them. If you've ever helped with a special event, you know how involved that is, and the more people there to be able, to make it the best it can be, the better. And then like the nature discovery area, building and improving structures. We have an owl enclosure at our site too that was built all by our volunteers. Plus, I'm sure you can think of some at your areas too, that have been contributed to from our volunteers. And now I'd like to pass it over to Jeff, and he's going to talk about the volunteer administration.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you actually manage the volunteers once you have them. And basically what every organization needs is a great volunteer policy. Your volunteer policy it's really the basis, it's the foundation of how you're going to run your volunteer programs. So a good policy, it's going to determine actions and set boundaries, and it establishes lines of communication and accountability. Also, it puts everyone on an equal footing. So it's important so a volunteer knows what's going on. And particularly when you have volunteers that hop around from different sections within an organization, you want everything ran the same way and you want it to run smoothly. A good policy will also explain to the volunteer how their work actually contributes to your goals and then your overall mission over the organization. That's important for a volunteer to feel fulfilled that they're actually contributing to the overall goals of the organization. And then you also want to include a recognition component for your volunteers. The recognition component is very important because it helps the volunteers feel appreciated, and then it gives them more satisfaction and helps with retention. And so all of these items, it's not just to say, oh yeah, we have a volunteer program. Remember, the whole point of your volunteer program is to increase your program's effectiveness and improve them. So the life cycle of a volunteer from the point of an organization starts with the planning. Deciding to have a volunteer program, it's a really big decision. There's a lot involved with it. So you really need to make a long, hard choice. Do we need volunteers? What are we going to do with them? And how are we going to administer them? So the policy also touches on that. So who exactly is going to be responsible for them? And next will be your position description. The position description really hammers out the details of what particular role a volunteer will be doing, who they answer to, and the work that needs to get done with them. Next is recruitment. That's basically how do we find the volunteers, and how do they find us? That's followed by application and screening. So the application and screening is also a very important step. I know a lot of places, they're just happy to have volunteers. You'll take whoever comes. But when you have volunteers who are going to be working with children or maybe even vulnerable other populations, you really need to make sure you do that background check, the fingerprinting, and then even follow up with interviews. And if you have the resources, you can do references and reference checks, and just really make sure you're getting the type of person that you want for the roles that you need fulfilled. Once you have a staff of or a recruited pool of volunteers, you need to orient them and train them. That's also important because you need to give people the tools and training in order to do their job successfully. You don't want to have a bunch of highly qualified people and then they show up and they don't know what they're doing and what's expected of them. So it's really important to onboard the people properly and set them up for success. And then the final stages are just your supervision, dismissal, recognition, and feedback. And that's the same as you would do for any paid employee. So it's really good just to think of a volunteer as a non-paid employee, and you essentially go through all the same steps with them. So just a few key things to remember are volunteers are not paid, but they're not free. It's really a big commitment of time and money to organize and run a successful volunteer program. Whether it's you need to spend money on tools or uniforms or training packets or just all the time that it takes to organize them. Volunteers shouldn't be an afterthought, like, oh, we need some work done, let's just get some volunteers to do it. That's not the way to approach your volunteer program. And once you have a bunch of motivated volunteers, you need to do things to keep them motivated and feeling empowered to do their job. You need to give them adequate training, adequate feedback, just all the educational resources they need. And again, you need to show them some recognition. Recognition is very important. And then also you need to make sure you have the right people in the right role. It's very important. Otherwise, they're going to feel unfulfilled and you're going to have a problem with volunteer retention. So I'm going to pass it on now to Britney, and she's going to explain to you more about volunteer recruitment.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so like Jeff said, I'm going to be diving a little deeper into volunteer recruitment, and these are a few ways to let the public know of the different opportunities you have to offer, starting off with the press release. This is an inexpensive way to get information out to your local media. Next, we have print marketing by placing flyers in high traffic areas such as recreation centers, parks, and even your office buildings. This is shown to be a great way to get the word out regarding your volunteer needs. Social media. It's become a common source for sharing information, and it gives you the opportunity to reach thousands of people at the click of a button. It also allows us to share what we're doing within our programs with photos and videos. Your website. You want to have your opportunities, resources, or any paperwork that you may require available in one central location. So when volunteers visit your webpage, they can find all the information they need. And last, we have networking. So word of mouth from staff members and current and past volunteers. It's important to provide memorable experiences so that they will share their stories with their friends and family who may turn into volunteers for you as well. Now, these are just a few trends that we've noticed within volunteerism. I'm going to start off with special skill sets, and this would be someone who's looking to volunteer in an area related to their career field or a hobby that they have a lot of experience in. A quick example of this would be someone who has many years of gardening experience, and they look to volunteer at events revolving around planting trees or flowers in the park. Volunteer training, as Jeff mentioned earlier, screening and training processes are designed to keep participants safe and to ensure accepted volunteers are placed in positions that best fit their skill sets. Required volunteer hours. In our office, sometimes we receive calls from Girl Scouts and Boy Scout troops who are looking to complete their community service hours or projects in the park. And the same goes for high school students. I know when I graduated from high school, I was required to have 100 volunteer hours before I was cleared for graduation. So this is something I don't think we'll see a change in anytime soon. And last, we have parent volunteers, coaches, team parents, referees, and officials. For some, it may be an opportunity for the parent to spend more time with their child. For others, by having a parent volunteer with the program, it may be the only way that the child will feel comfortable enough to jump out and try something new. But either way, we appreciate the parent volunteers to help our programs to thrive. And for my last slide, I'm just going to touch base on a few changes that we've noticed within volunteerism. The first being socially distanced volunteer opportunities. Obviously, due to COVID, we've seen a decline in festivals and large events, so we have not required volunteers in these areas, but we have seen an increase in passive volunteering, which is when you go out on your own or in a small group, such as your household, looking for ways to volunteer in the park. We've also seen an increase in food pickups and drop-offs, and actually one of our group members, Adam, mentioned that he took part in a few of these over the last year. Generational service. So stereotypes may imply that the average volunteer is a senior adult with a lot of extra time on their hands, but according to research done by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2016, which was the earliest year or the most recent year available, those most likely to volunteer were Generation X and baby boomers, tied at 28%, and these are people ages 35 to 54, with the lowest volunteer rate seen among millennials at 18%, leaving Generation Z solidly in the middle at 26%. While we do have volunteers of all ages assisting our programs, we have noticed that we've experienced trouble with retaining all generations long term. But with that being said, now if you could all give your attention to Adam, who will be closing us out today.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Investing in community spaces is key when it comes to recreation and parks. Volunteers contribute a great deal to our community spaces, and as we know, a public space can be an asset or a liability to the community. In order to make these an asset, we use our volunteers, and this can contribute to a general quality of life. It can provide exposure and an opportunity for a wide range of activities, instill a sense of ownership and pride within our community, prevent crime and other negative behavior from occurring in the community, attract new residents, and give an overall economic boost within our community. And in my opinion, even more importantly, are investing in community members. We would like to create programs that empower citizens to take ownership of their local areas and give them the necessary resources to make sure their volunteering is meaningful and volunteer retention takes place. So direct outreach to schools and youth groups can attract a younger, new generation to the natural world. And I personally am overly excited for this summer at our skate park. We have a skate camp and we have a new generation of youth coming as first-time volunteers that participated in that program, and now they're giving back to volunteer. They have countless years of experience, and they're that invested within the program that they want to show the younger generation how meaningful it is and give their time. This helps park professionals to take a backseat as locals make the change that they want to see within their community. In conclusion, our group believes that volunteerism is an integral part of the recreation and parks industry. What we do day in and day out and our wonderful programs and events could not happen without such great volunteers and retaining those volunteers year in and year out. So during our presentation, we touched on the community, contributions, policies and procedures, recruitment, trends, and what investments need to be made in keeping volunteerism a key focus in recreation and parks. And I want to leave you with one quote that our group enjoyed, and that was from Winston Churchill. And that quote was, "You make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give." And that really hit us deep, and we enjoyed that quote, and it went right along with our presentation. Here are our references, and they're available if anybody needs those, we can send them out. And the Fearsome Foursome would like to thank you again for your time and attention today. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Sue Simmons. Thank you. It was, you folks shook me up a little bit, made me think a little bit more. Lauren, I want you to know I am coming to visit that park where you shared those pictures. I'm curious, Jeff, I was especially interested in your comments about points of volunteer management. And what I'm curious about is what's the skill set? There is a skill set, or any of you could respond to this. There is a skill set for volunteer cultivation and management and that kind of a thing. Sometimes volunteers are perceived as a sort of a commodity, and yet your presentation really did not focus on that at all. It was a development opportunity, and I'm curious, what's the skill set you are looking for in terms of staff managers, staff leaders of volunteers, so that you really are reinforcing that that mindset of an asset, not a commodity kind of a thing?
Yeah, I'd be glad to answer that. But just based on my own experiences, first I have to say my belief is volunteers are what make the world go round. Mm-hmm. So if I find people that share in that viewpoint and then appreciate a diversity of volunteers and are willing to go out of their way to establish their rapport with volunteers and make the volunteers feel appreciated, that's the kind of people I want to have leading volunteers in my group. I don't like people that view volunteers as something that you have to do, or, oh, that's how we're just going to save some money and we'll have volunteers do it. That's completely the wrong mindset to have. Volunteers to me are a great asset to an organization. Employees of an organization are the greatest asset, and I just view volunteers as non-paid employees. So the people that I want to have managing volunteers are people that share that same mindset and see the value of anyone that's willing to donate their time and resources to an organization. So in following that up, I think anyone that manages volunteers should have volunteered somewhere else at some other time in their life so they can appreciate the other side of the relationship. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a quick question. This is Kathy Burley. I'm from Hartford County Parks and Rec. Yay, Lauren. You did mention that the stereotypical volunteer, you know, that's changing a little. Our department is very based on, a lot of our programming is done through rec councils, which are 100% volunteer. So I was wondering if you guys saw any evidence about the quantity of volunteers. There's been some discussion that it's not a priority in some generations as it was previously. And I was wondering if you stumbled across any of that information while doing this presentation.
I didn't see anything about the quantity, but I did actually, something that I did not include was, even though in the research that I presented in the presentation, it said the millennials were at 18%, they did see a surge that we should be looking at millennials and Generation Z to kind of begin to take over as far as volunteerism.
Oh, that's good to hear.
We got time for one more quick question.
I have a
Great.
question.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Okay. First of all, I want to tell you guys, you did a fantastic job. That was a great presentation, and I got a lot out of it. And it's something that I do. I work with volunteers. So my question to
I think you cut out, so we didn't hear.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
obviously probably make the form to whatever project is going on, but does anybody have a really great volunteer form and policy that they could share?
I mean, I'm pretty proud of our department's volunteer program. And so, I mean, if you were to contact me, all our stuff's available. I can share it with you. I just don't have it on here right now.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I'll get your contact information from Holly.
Okay, thank you.
Will do. All right, we need to close out the questions. So group one, good job. I'm going to send you to your judging panel. So when you're asked, yeah, great job. Say yes when I put you in the room.